Khalil Gibran once said, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." The Vulnerable Power Show is a deep dive into the heart of leadership. Hear raw insights and wisdom from experienced leaders who transformed during their dark night of the soul journey, now bringing light to the world. Spotlighting heart-centered leaders that have transformed, stepping into their fullest light and mission. Learn how you, too, can weather life's storm and thrive. What are the keys for successful personal growth and life-changing transformation? It is my intention to bring you wisdom, empowerment, hope, and inspiration, so you too can ascend to your fullest light as a leader, to bring about impact for the collective good. Greetings, everybody, and welcome back for a rousing edition of the Vulnerable Power Show, late night over here in Southern California and early over yonder across the pond with a dear soul brother, as today we take a deep dive into conscious business leadership and specifically the heart of Sir Barry Holmes, a dear soul brother who's joining me all the way from the UK. And I'm very grateful and enlightened to have him here. And as always, the premise for the show, the Vulnerable Power Show, 4 intentions: to show you the inner workings of transformation. What is it like to go within, do that inner work for deep impact? To inspire other leaders that may be at various points along their journey with hope. You too can do this. You too can do this inner work. You too can sculpt your leadership the way you intend. And lastly, to espouse heart-centered leadership. And Barry is definitely a good example of that integration and that conscious business leadership. Barry, how you doing this morning, my evening?
Morning. It's 6 a.m. here. It's dark outside. I'm sat downstairs. The Christmas decorations are up, and it's really lovely to see you, Hass.
It's a pleasure. I wanted, before we hand the mic off and you share with us your awakening journey, how it shaped your business leadership, I want to take a moment to introduce the guest and how I, converged paths or reconverged paths with Barry. So a dear soul sister of ours, Kate Griffiths, who was on the show not too long ago, who will hopefully be a regular. Perhaps we can pester you to be a regular. We'll see. Invited me to a group where I met Barry and we hit it off right away. And it's been a few months and it feels like a lifetime. Really, for me, the thing that stands out about Barry, and he's going to talk about a lot of things and share really, really potent wisdom, because he is, for me, a very good example of embodied leadership. The word aesthetic, he impressed that upon me. And then I went, as I usually do, go searching the etymology of the word. And I found, quite intriguingly, that it correlates to discernment, which, lo and behold, has been a theme for me. Discernment as to my inner landscape, discernment as to what I'm doing and how I'm showing up, and more importantly, discernment as to whether I'm actually living and being, softening. And beauty is what Barry really brings forward in his leadership. So without further ado, Barry, why don't you start us off wherever you feel inspired, beginning, end, middle, top, bottom, sideways. What would you like to start with as far as your awakening journey and how it shaped where you're at and what you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you, Hass. The first thing that comes is to pick up on what you just said around the aesthetic. For me, the feeling is everything. And it's taken me a long while to realize just what that actually means. My family's comment about me my whole life up to very recently was, oh, Barry thinks too much. So I certainly spent a lot of my life trying to figure it out. And the more I knew, the more I read, the more I saw. And that experience was a bit like just choosing one branch of a tree and just continuing to go out and out on that branch, just going out rather than going up. It just took me to thinking takes you to more thinking, to more thinking. And the more my work became more complex, and the scale of the projects and all of them were legitimized around the thinking, the cognitive side, bringing in more and more intelligence. And I nearly always had this sense like we're just missing something fundamental. And that sense of what was missing, I couldn't explain it. I couldn't describe it. I found it very difficult to talk about with others. But I always knew that there was something, that not only was something else going on, there was also the thing that else was going on was significantly more important and fundamental than what seemed to be going on. And I guess that became just this relentless curiosity around, well, what is going on behind what's appearing or what seems to be happening. And I guess if I was generalizing it, I'd say it was, I just decided, right, I need to understand more about the nature of, I call it like energy, like what is going on here, and how it would play out. We would work on all kinds of fascinating projects, and some of those projects, long time scale, decent budget, very well prepared, good plan, everyone aligned, and ultimately the outcomes would be a bit bleh, you know, we'd get what we sort of thought, but actually there was something missing. There was a quality that was missing. And other times would be in some random place, hardly any budget, difficult situation, every problem possible, and like the feeling was incredible. You just knew. And so I started to realize that the external circumstances had nothing to do with what was going on. And that kind of started to drive my mind a bit crazy. Yeah, and I've seen a lot since then. And a phrase comes to mind that I heard only about a year and a half ago, but it struck me so completely that, and somebody said to me, our eyes aren't for seeing, our eyes are for receiving. And I believe, certainly I have the experience that I see through my body. And by that I mean, when I say to people I see, what I really mean is I feel, but it is more of a seeing. It's like I know stuff in an absolute sense. I have a sense and a feeling of what's going on, and I can't always find the words to articulate that. I wonder about that, what other people's experience of that, and that for me is what aesthetic means to me, that feeling. And I mean, I've done so much development, particularly over the last 8 months, and I had a very dear friend take me through a modality called a stillness meditation. And she said to me, the difference between what's true and what looks true is almost imperceptible. And so for me, and I don't feel I'm unique. I feel all humans have the capacity to discern. All of us have the capacity to sense into what is and isn't real or true. And it requires an entirely different point of attention. It's, this phrase has come to me in the last month, which is trying to experience life through thinking is like trying to pass the ocean through a pinprick. And no matter how ridiculous it is, we still try. I spent years and years trying. It's and for me, I said to somebody yesterday, I feel this awareness, this I'd call it, it's a funny way to describe it. It's not a knowing, it's a realization of unknowing. It feels like my big toe is in the water. I haven't even yet begun to become submerged, but just the experience of what my big toe feels like in this water makes the whole previous part of my life feel like, oh my God. It's like I've read the first line in the first book in the library, and that's all I've read. And I look down and it goes miles in all directions. Like there's a library in Oxford in England called the Oxford Camera. And it's famous throughout the world because it's contained within it is every book ever written in the English language since the beginning. And there's these catacombs that go on forever. And the realization that exploration into the real nature of reality, energy, possibility is all here. It's all just waiting for my capacity, our capacity to tune in and feel into it. And I believe that's the renaissance for all of us. That's the possibility, and that's the change that's happening now.
I like how you word it as a renaissance, because I would say you're definitely a quintessential renaissance being. So let's go back. Let's unpack some of that if we can. So when you say blah, when you say some of these projects, you put in, so we're talking in an organizational development center, more or less, if I'm not mistaken. So when you say that blah, what do you mean? Because I get it for the audience's sake now as a practitioner, having the expertise, because beauty in business, right? Aesthetic in business. I mean, it may be bewildering because some of the things you said, which I agree with, which is why you're here, because you speak, from a different perspective, and it's the same essence or what's going on behind the scenes, as you alluded to. Feeling is everything, going on these lens of thinking, seeing through the body. I love that. That's that attunement, that renaissance, as you put it. And then I feel like what you're really with this blah is a different point of attention. It feels like when you started to have these blah realizations, you then started to shift out of thinking into feeling. So what does blah mean, and how do you correlate that to business results, ROI, the things that people that may be listening are concerned about? How does this beauty, how does this unblah, address that? As amorphous as that question is right now.
Well, to do that, I need to give a broader frame of reference. So I was born in Norway, outside the UK. Mum's Norwegian. My dad was from the UK, was in the Navy. So my childhood was relocating every couple of years. I had a couple of years in Hong Kong. So that meant joining schools once the term had already started. And beyond junior school, I found most of my school days, a long time ago now, fairly traumatic in the sense of my nature's one where I love that phrase. I love to learn, but I don't like being taught. And the method of teaching and that kind of feeling and resistance to being told how to think and what to do and how to be really never left. And then when I got into the world of work and I saw that the way that training and teaching was done, it was the same premise. And I mean, if we go back a couple of hundred years, the original intention of education was not learning, it's compliance. Education was formed as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution to get people into the cities in order that they would be compliant and fit in with a Newtonian mechanistic way of living and being. And that model of learning is prevalent across the world now. And so it was relatively easy when we started the business with Zoom, with a mission to change the way the world thinks about learning. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew the way it was so appalling that just by changing that type of learning experience into actual experiences, we differentiated ourselves immediately, virtually from everybody, and had just the most phenomenal results relatively in terms of taking people on a journey, giving them an experience. And that worked for 18 years to varying degrees. But what I started to see after that time was sometimes the feeling that people had around what we were doing just didn't match. It was a bit like, it felt like we were trying to make people be or do something that didn't feel right for them. And obviously the tension arises, you know, we're getting paid whatever to create a certain outcome, there's an expectation. And it also felt like it was almost like putting on a performance, that what we were able to do was create a particular feeling or vibe or sense of possibility. But if that intent, if the intention sitting underneath that wasn't true, wasn't real, didn't have substance to it, it just felt like we were manipulating people, actually. And then that created a real problem for me, because once I saw that, it then didn't become possible for me to do what I do with a full heart, and I can't do anything with a full heart. And what it came down to, and I can elaborate on this because it's kind of a big statement, is I saw that the nature of all forms of coercion, no matter how subtle, are wrong, with no exception. And I know that's it provokes a lot of reaction in lots of my friends. That was a dilemma point, because we were working on quite a number of different projects. And what I saw was, not only was coercion fundamentally wrong, but coercion has nothing to do with real change. Even the intention to coerce gets in the way of the change that is already happening and wants to happen. And then that became fascinating, because it seems to the logical mind, well, we want to move from here to here. Let's identify the outcome. Let's identify the current state. And then let's develop a method to move from A to B. It's like, you know, why don't humans work like algorithms, just to figure out the algorithm? And I'd say most modalities are based on a version of that. If you just do this, this will shift to that. And that is absolutely not true. It's a complete illusion, and it always was. And then usually I get a long pause after that. Well, so how do you create change without coercion? I was having a conversation with somebody about this last night. And I can't say I have the answer to that, but I certainly have some answers to that. And the work that I'm doing, the work that we're doing, has a completely different quality to it. A completely different quality to it. And not only does it have a different quality to it, it's the shifts or the changes or the manifestations, they remain. Once the thing has moved, or I've moved, or we've moved, that is now the way it is. So what would happen before was we could artificially create almost like an energetic bubble where people felt loved, cared about, interested. And then as soon as we would leave, or the project would end, or something would happen, then a bit of elastic, the elastic snaps, everything returns, because everything would return to the shape in which it's held. So unless the shape is addressed, then how can you create anything that's real or true and sustaining? And I've been involved in them. I mean, organizations, companies spending hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds on these projects that essentially everyone kind of knew, well, let's stick this out and see. And at the end, the elastic snaps and we return to where we were. And there's huge opportunity. For a long while, I had half the story, which was coercion is wrong, but it's not a very easy easy message to sell, because it's kind of like, well, and I had someone help me that I met early in lockdown, Brian Hennessy, actually. And he's very, very good with language. And he said, well, what are you actually talking about? You're talking about not coercing. So what are you talking about? And he helped me come up with this phrase, expansion through resonance. Expansion through resonance. And the reason I love that phrase is, and expansion rather than growth, for me, growth is a good word. There's certain connotations with what growth means, because growth can mean more, and how much is more and how much is enough. And I feel like that's part of the situation that we've got now. For me, expansion means full realization of what already is, everything fulfilling its intended purpose to its ultimate possible expression. And that for me is natural in everything and all of us. And the resonance for me is the feeling, the vibe, the sense. And I believe that's the power that is, regardless of whether we perceive it or not. And humans' misunderstanding is we need to do something to make things as they should be. What I'm realizing fairly late on in my life is life already is perfect exactly as it is. And it's about my attunement to what is and the appreciation of that. And that feeling in that moment when that happens, that's bliss.
Heaven on earth is here. So this gold. It's so multidimensional and it's subtle. You show up all blissed out, all in your isness, beauty this, soften that, and then you lay some quantum knowledge, multidimensional knowledge, and then you put a cherry of Brian Hennessy, who, shout out to you, Brian, if you're watching. Hopefully you'll come on soon too. So let me unpack this, because this is one of the things that was a dance for me when I first met you, because our styles, I come from law and I'm more about categorization, and I didn't realize I was blah. So I guess that's your attunement. You're very finely attuned. And I like that about you, because it's like the proverbial canary in the coal mine. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't vibe right, if it doesn't resonate, Barry will tell you. Barry will know. And you've shown me that. So a couple of things that come up for me, and I was, sitting back, and there's so many different ways we can take the conversation now. So what really pops out is a couple of things, because I know that's your tagline. And when we met, it was, what does that mean to me? When I saw it, it was making the world see a new way of learning. And when you unpack that for me now, I like it, because it's really, I call it, it's not our systems and processes that are the problem. It's the relationship to the systems and processes. And it was a very telekinetic thing. You said the word vibe as I was writing it, because I talk about it as the vibe in the ecosystem. This notion of, you talk about, expanding the resonance and making sure that the core, right? Every ecosystem has a center and has a vibe, has an energy about it. And making sure you're actually dealing with that, not applying a superficial layer that when you then leave as a consultant, a lot of integrity in that it's not about the paycheck. It's about, how do we get that sustainability? And the question still hinges on, I'm not alarmed by it, because I like it, because that's where you and I can go up into some very expansive places, is I've grappled with this myself, is what is that fine line? And it is all about personal responsibility from my perspective, between coercion and a mechanical. And I agree with your perspective. It's very much a byproduct of industrialization. It's about conforming. Conforming doesn't bring innovation, which we'll hopefully get to later. What is innovation? How do you bring about innovation versus regurgitation? You know, same thing, repackaged, same shit, repackaged with a nice little bow. Oh, now it's mindfulness. Tomorrow it's conscious business. You know, these aren't catchphrases for you. This is the way you live. And it's exemplified by the vibration you make me feel, the resonance. So talk to me about that. Like go deeper into what does that mean? What is that fine line for you? Because I've oftentimes pushed up against you, right? With this warlike, you know, the lawyer warrior mentality of, no, we need to influence. For me, I wouldn't call. So let me put this into a cogent, since you blew my mind. The audience can tell. It's like I'm having a berry ecstasy moment. How do you draw? Let's start here. Subpart A. How do you draw the fine line between influence and coercion? Not the question I thought would come out of my mouth. Let's start there. What does influence look like, and what is coercion? Because a lawyer will tell you influence, and then Barry, from my hunch, will say, no, Hass, that's coercion. You've crossed the line. So how do you perceive influence versus coercion?
It's really simple. What is my intention? And when I ask myself that question, because it's only a question we can answer for ourselves, if in my heart that is the truest expression, and that's coming from a place of purity, from love, in the absence of, let's call it the little me, the needy me, the wanty me, then what gets expressed is perfect. Everything else that's not that, it's like a drop of ink into a swimming pool of water. Even if there's a fraction of something that's not that, there's something else going on. And that something else that is going on gets in the way of the true expression.
So it's like a tainting of the proverbial well or ecosystem, in a sense.
Well, yeah, and it's I loved what you said earlier, and it's how things become corrupted. I mean, I listened to the talk that you did with Virginia around the possibility for renaissance of the law. I mean, I found it just mind-bending, the possibility and the truth of what you were saying, that law in its origins had a pure intention that set out to provide a framework for humans to live in equality and equity and relate to each other in ways, and the possibility of the law not being something that capitalizes and benefits from conflict and suffering, but actually the opposite. And you reminded me, I mean, I really love the work of Charles Eisenstein, and he talks about the sacred economy. And I love to connect what you said is nothing in this world is either right or wrong. It is what it is. The opportunity that we have is for everything, including us, to fulfill the purpose for which it was originally intended. And that includes business and money and structures and institutions, the law, learning. What we currently have is an accumulated misunderstanding based on stories that have become fixed over time. And we have that dear friend, Malk, I mean, shout out to Malk. I mean, oh my God, like turned up like Yoda 6 months ago and has been mentoring me ever since. Malk talks about we each have our own unique stories. There are our stories, our collective stories, and that's the basis on which society is organized and structured. And there's this story, which is really the fundamental truth that's seeking to emerge. And right now there's a tension between the collective stories. The gap.
Bridge the two in between.
Yeah.
So this is beautiful, because, you let's start at the end for a second. Sacred economy. And yeah,
Mm,
shout out to Malcolm Lewis, who's got an invite and is pending,
mm,
and we'll hopefully have you on here
mm,
soon. Oh, two business Merlins in one
mm.
room. Wait, watch out. So, what sacred economy? Tell me more. I'm intrigued. I've literally, even I'm like, huh? Sacred and economy? You blew another gasket.
Mm.
Those are not two words you would think, much like beauty in business, aesthetic in business,
Yeah.
quality in business, right? Relational alchemy in business. What's that all about? Sacred and economy. Talk to me about that. Can you take us into a foray really quickly and for the audience,
Yeah.
for my sake?
Um, Up until the last 8 months before what's happening, there was already a trend around ethics in business. There was more and more scrutiny around, are we doing the right thing? Attention has been being put on everything, everywhere, child labor, recycling. And back in March, I was involved in a movement called the Rise of the Feminine in Business.
Wow.
And the intention was to move the conversation beyond men and women in business, which is a very binary, this or that type conversation, into a conversation about the nature of masculine and feminine energy in relation to business. And this is working with entrepreneurs, startups, businesses. It's really at the hard end of commerce, finance, business growth, investment, right in the heart of London. Two wonderful clubs, Homegrown and Home House, that I'm a member. And it was incredible how much resonance we found with that subject. And then lockdown happened, and what we intended to do was cancelled. But what we found was an enormous appetite to have this conversation around a question that came from my dear friend Sarah, which is, if not this, as in the way we do it now, then what? And the realization was that there are very few answers to that question, but just the asking of it creates different possibilities. So if we're not going to flood the world with plastic, if we're not going to continue just to cut down all the forest, if we're not going to continue to just allow rampant capitalism just to fulfill its ultimate course of action, then what? So we had 21 incredible people from all around the world come and talk to their perspective on that question, all of whom I'd say work in the hard edge of commercial and finance. And what arose was a realization that money, resources, doing the right thing are not mutually exclusive. There's actually the opportunity to fuse all of these elements. There's a kind of alchemy, which is your art and form. I know there's a form of alchemy available, which provides a direction for everyone to find a truth in what they're doing and then align to that truth in a way that makes them actually, when you sort of getting ready to go to work, not that we go anywhere to work anymore, but you look in the mirror and you don't have to question what you're doing or why you're doing it. And sacred has all these kind of like religious connotations, like it's something, with candles and incense and big churches. But actually, what does it mean? It means everything's perfect as it is. Let it fulfill its natural purpose. And that includes everything within the human domain. We have a lot of things that do not fulfill their natural purposes. And so I feel sacred economics. There's some incredible books that's been written around this, the ascent of humankind, a more beautiful world our heart knows is possible. This has been written about prolifically by some incredibly brilliant people, and we're not there yet. And I feel it is the only future outcome for all of us to live in alignment with the natural order of things, the natural order of nature, and in doing so, fulfill our sacred purpose. And there's a kind of relief for me around it. Yeah. So yeah, I could talk a lot more about this in terms of detail because there's lots of projects involved. Well, I'll give an example.
Yeah.
So Sian Sutherland came and spoke passionately. She runs an organization, I think it's called Plastic Planet. The outcome is to eliminate plastic from across the world because it doesn't break down. So, for example, they're finding plastic at a subatomic level in the soil, in food that we're eating. It's everywhere.
It's micro pollution.
And yes. And from what I understand, she recently agreed with Lego for them to remove plastic as a substance in their product through the sort of opportunities that we're talking about. So there's people everywhere opening up and creating these new possibilities as you're aspiring to do within your profession around the law. And I feel like that's the work. If we're not looking there, then what are we doing? We're either colluding with the way it is, or we're creating what's coming and aligning with that. And it feels like an amazing privilege and opportunity.
I like that. So let's go back 2 steps. So thank you. So sacred for me, what comes up is a couple of things based on, a gestalt of us riffing here is, aesthetic discernment. It's about stripping away, sacred, to make holy, to purify, to clarify, to distill down to the essence, right? If everything is energy and the highest energy is loving light, and you allow that to come down and operate through you and seed that intentionality into your ecosystem, there's no ink in the well. It's when we then add stories, whatever we do, how we call it stories, biases, trauma. There's layers and veils, and then we collude. I like that. We collude and perpetuate and promulgate, and we further this cycle. And I like that you've intentionally paused and been like, oh, what's going on here? Because, and then you talk about purpose in a way that's not a catchphrase. Not that there's anything wrong with anybody out there that's using it. I feel like you're getting to the quintessential essence of purpose, which goes back to this full realization of potential, which is not only, again, Aristotelian. I think you have a pragmatic zone of genius here that I've personally experienced with you, which is you've allowed me personally, and simply our interactions, you've invited me to strip down, to discern, to get to my aesthetic, my core essence. And that's allowed a birthing almost like that. And then it goes back to how we started, right? When you talk about a different point of attention, which allows one to then question and go in and go, huh, what am I doing? Yeah. And then and only then can the fish see itself separate from the water and how conjoined we are to that resonance field. And then by stripping out. So if people are stuck, right? So anybody listening, because that's one thing that I have a intellectual hard on for a lack of a better description, that I inquire about this on the show. I go, I was stuck. I sense you were stuck at points. We joke between you and I, the dark cavern is what you call the dark night of the soul, your allegory for this process, this unfolding. So not so much on the personal level, on a more business leader level. And if you feel inspired to conjoin it to your own journey or independent of that, maybe it's as a practitioner, how do you advise clients? How do you deal with this, this being stuck in this resonance of having ink and not knowing it? Having ink in my well and not knowing it, or I call it being a jerk and not knowing it. The desensitization, the thinking. There's many different ways we can access this inquiry. For me, it's how do you deal with that rubber band, right? Because that rubber band, it's an illusion for us to say that rubber band can't stretch infinitely. You and I know that very well. We dance in that space. So how about those that are listening that are like, Barry Hass, I keep trying to stretch my rubber band of my consciousness, my attention field. What do you say to them? How do you approach? How do you relate?
Well, the first thing I'll say is don't worry too much. Because despite your best efforts, you are who you are.
Touche.
And the next thing I'd say, and I mean this literally, and I mean every word, is you're not who you think you are.
Ooh.
And I mean that literally, as in the thoughts we have about who we are can't possibly be who we are. And that awareness that they're thoughts, not like an empirical, right, therefore that's who I am.
Then who are we? Hold on, let's pause. Who are we? If I'm not who I think I am, who am I? Not rhetorical and not facetious, despite my comical demeanor.
Well,
who are you? Who are you? Who am I? If I get that. I mean, you mean identity. Is that what you mean? Is it identity?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're not our identity, then who are we, Barry? Let's pause there, and I'll bring you back to this flow. Who are we? If we're not who we think we are, who are we? From your expression of that truth.
We're everything and nothing.
Why does that matter to come to that realization in terms of realizing our full spectrum of our resonance? Why is that important?
Because from there, our gift can come and be expressed. And without that realization, we're busy trying to be something, to do something, to fix something. And that is the infinite hamster wheel. There's nowhere to go because it's never ending. More money, more this, more attractive, bigger business, this external attempt of validation. And what I do know is, or certainly for me, the answer started to come, or the awareness started to come, was when I completely stopped looking outside of myself for who I was. As in trainer, facilitator, company owner, triathlete, brother, God, list. We've all got these lists of these labels that we have for ourselves. And it's a kind of relief. It's like being on a treasure hunt as a kid, and you've looked under every single rock, and you suddenly realize it's just not under any of them. You can keep looking if you enjoy the looking, but the knowing that it's not under anything, it's not outside of me or you. It's already there. It's already inside. It's already known. And I feel, or I believe, that most, if not all, forms of mental distress, physical distress, are a non-realization awareness of who we are and the attempt to find it somewhere else. I mean, I really love this analogy. Somebody loses their keys under a lamppost, and a friend comes along and says, "Let me help you look for them." And after an hour, said, "Well, where did you drop them?" And he points over to them in the dark, and he says, "Well, why aren't you looking over there?" And he says, "Well, I can't see anything over there." So we look. I certainly did. I was looking in all the wrong places. I don't feel harsh about that. I mean, I'm a human being. It was innocent. But the realization that nothing that I did or found or had or got, or no relationship, was going to shift the feeling. I mean, for me, that was my dark night, whatever you call it, the point in the cavern. When I sat in my beautiful apartment and returned from an international flight and got the wine out, and friends came around, and that sort of feeling, that sinking emptiness and dread just would return. And I knew the things that would sort of sustain, or postpone it or cover it up, just ceased to work. There was a kind of a terror and a petrification in me around that. And I feel, well, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, But I wonder what goes through people's minds, it's 2 o'clock in the morning when they wake up, or when they're driving off to work and they're wondering about what they're doing. It's like, there's something beautiful that we're always called home, which is to ourselves. And it's our choice whether we answer it or not. And we're not judged for not answering it. But what happens is we do suffer. We suffer from not answering it. And then we make up a story about what the suffering's about. And often, I certainly did, we fill it with something that's not the real answer. Well, I need some more money. Well, I need a new relationship. Well, I need to get my body fat to 8%. I mean, that's the thing. I'm out there now. So what I say is, I took out all goal setting from all aspects of my life. Not so much goal setting, measurement. Like, because what does measurement do to us? It creates a dissonance and an anxiety. I mean, you're an incredibly beautiful man. When we met, there's two things that came to me. One is, I know the purity of your intention. I felt it immediately. And then the other thing, which is part of our connection, is you're a complete aesthetic. Like, you bathe in it, you love in it, the colors, the feeling, the vibe, your voice. And there's so much joy in that experience of who we actually are, and then the relating of our experience. And I'm going to give another point to Brian, because I know he spent a lifetime looking at the nature of helping people express their unique gifts. And I believe everyone has a unique gift, that it is exclusively them and no one else. And the expression of that makes everything else they're trying to do kind of so secondary, almost to be irrelevant. And it's the collective expression of our gifts that is the renaissance that's happening right now. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it is happening, whether we like it or not. Our choices, our degree of resistance to it, and that resistance is based on attachment to the way we think it should be.
That sounds like a peculiar circus. Can you elaborate on that? Wonderful dovetail.
Yeah.
Tell us about this book. Is it Peculiar Circus, or am I saying the title?
Well, there's two things. Based on our experience of, if not this, then what, a new era of enterprise, we've written a book which is more of a contemplation around possibility than a prognosis of what the world's going to look like in the future. And we ask what we feel are some relevant and heartening questions. And that book will be available in the new year. And then what we saw was, well, what if people want to explore those questions? And we've just finished a pilot of a Peculiar Safari. And a Peculiar Safari was our attempt to create a learning experience that wasn't outside in. So it's not based on modalities. It's not based on you're broken and you need fixing and come and do this thing and you'll learn this and then you'll be okay. We've designed something that is inside out, which sounds, I don't know how that sounds.
Sounds beautiful.
It's a space to come and have an individual inquiry into the nature of who am I, and be held in that inquiry, in the fellowship of others. And I could put you on a call with any one of the 12 people who came, and they would tell you that was the most extraordinary learning experience of their lives. So we're just at the beginning of this, and it's really exciting, and certainly the direction for me going forward.
That sounds like a very big tent you're building. So let me ask you, what was so spectacular about it? So weave it together, Maestro. So this almost like you're a ringleader of sorts. So if you were to say your learnings from the blahness that you both experienced as a practitioner in your life, coming back to the big apartment, realizing what I'm hearing from you now is that this, and I like how you phrased it based on what Malcolm is kind of imbued, is this accumulation of stories of misunderstanding. It sounds
Yeah.
like the identity construct is what is the trap, is the deep cavern, the measurements, the schemata, as it were, in psychology, right? This becomes the cavern or the hamster wheel, and we're running within it, the proverbial Neoplatonic cave. And then to break through that, it feels to me like Peculiar Safari is an opportunity to explore that experientially. So I may be wrong. I'm feeling in the dark. So would you unpack that for us? What makes it so extraordinary? I know, as a practitioner and vibing with you, and as we unpack this, for the audience's sake and for my sake, because I'm curious about this Peculiar Safari.
Quinn Ferrell said to me about a month ago on a program we're working on together, he said, leadership is about opening and holding space, not filling it. And life currently privileges people or filling it, content. And by constantly giving people content, there's no space. There's no space to reflect. There's no space to look in. So Peculiar Safari is, and it's back to that intention, and it takes self-awareness and confidence, because it's a bit like you and me going on a trip and you say to me, where we're going? And I say, well, I don't know. And say, what are we going to see? No idea. What's going to happen? There's a certain level of nervous about that, but there's also a level of excitement. So the Peculiar Safari is about opening a space with 100% or as close as you can get, clear intention, and then holding that space, which just means allowing whatever wants to emerge, to be expressed, to surface, to come, and to remove any value judgment about that. So this idea that this is a positive experience, this is a negative experience, this is good, this is bad. Who knows what is a good or bad experience? One of the analogies I love, and this goes back to Charles Eisenstein's work around aligning with nature, that which is the wrong season, right? It seems like a ridiculous question. But in business, we negate autumn and winter. We only want spring and summer, growth, more, success. You know, the chart goes only upwards continuously forever. Well, that's not natural. There's a natural process of autumn, and it's beautiful, and then there's winter. So the natural process of life is this balance between life and death, black and white, up and down, cold and hot. And when we see that for ourselves, this attachment to positivity, to inverted commas, good things, to everything always working, starts to loosen. And we could be more accepting of the natural order of life, the natural order of nature. And all the clues are everywhere. It's not like we don't know. It's just we're disconnected from it because we're locked into this kind of box of expectation. And then that's legitimized because we look left and right and we do the, you okay? I'm okay. Yeah, job's okay. We kind of tell ourselves these narratives and then go along until we don't. I feel that it's not like we exclusively have the answer through Peculiar Safari. What I know from my own experience is this is the direction, the self-inquiry, the looking inwards, the contemplation, the allowing, and everything else is blah, blah, it's content, more content.
Regurgitation. So this is fascinating, right? Because in alchemy, they say that you must dissolve. You can't pour new wine into an old wineskin, or was it lambskin, as they say in the biblical times.
Yeah.
So I get that. I get that there is this natural, cycle. And now we've beautifully and very naturally gravitated into this concept of what is innovation? How do we innovate? How do we sustainably innovate? And I love it because what I'm hearing from you is if we strip off the layers, if we discern, if we get into the aesthetic, the essence, we're intentional. and we seed and we hold that space, that it seems that what is meant to, if we poke through the veil, if we peek through the curtain, if we push the boundaries, if we question, go within, it seems like then what'll happen is there'll be a birthing. It'll be almost like what's supposed to be this, what you've alluded to, this full realization of the potential will unfurl, will open in the space. So it seems more and more that what you're doing is allowing for that inquiry, allowing for that space. How do you manage it? Yeah, that's the word that's going through. How do you manage it?
Oh, I'm laughing. You deliberately said that word because you know what I feel about the word manic.
I did not. And that's where it's funny. You think I'm a maniacal genius, and sometimes my old reputation gets the better of me. Here it slipped out. Literally. It came through. It popped into my head, inspired. I know you think it was a ploy. It is not. I truly mean that. For those that are watching, there's an inside joke about a meeting we were both in, and Barry thinks I'm blindsiding him with a follow-up. No, I'm being told to say, how do you manage? Well, it's a good question, because really, if you think about it, I used to call it negotiation. From my background in dispute resolution, we're negotiating life. We're maneuvering life. Nature is constantly negotiating. Nature is negotiation. We'll call it manage, negotiate. There's an element of whether we want to or not, and it's, you and I have, talked about this with in the space and in a group. What's the balance between the doing and the, right?
Well, well, for me, that comes back to the rebalancing of the masculine, the feminine, and you could characterize that super simplistically by talking about being and doing, and the balance of the being and the doing. And for me, apparently we're going into the age of Aquarius, we're going into the age of water. And if you imagine the energy is like water, well, if it's just expressed, it'll flow everywhere and go into the ground. And so I feel like it's about the container for that energy. And for me is around radical personal responsibility. And it's something that I've been and I'm being challenged around, because and you're smiling, there's a lot of the reluctance in me to want to take that radical responsibility, because I like just the flow of everything all the time, everywhere. And actually, there are specific times when everything needs a container, a direction. And that for me is, and this I feel like is contained in every human being. We're a blend of masculine and feminine. So if we can find this balance of the masculine and feminine within us and hold that balance, and we are helped and supported by it, through nature, then this subtle shift between being and doing is something that then becomes natural and innate. And then we lose this manic doingness, which is in effect a reflection of the distorted and overprivileged masculine. For me, it's that. For me, busyness is like poison. Because for me, and I've only realized, I mean, this is one of the blessings of this whole situation. I mean, there've been many terrible consequences, but one of the blessings for me has been, I thought I was, slowing down, becoming more contemplative. I was still moving 10 times faster and physically, literally moving. My mind was moving 10 times faster than is natural to me. I believe everyone has a natural rhythm and pace. And when we return, I mean, we both love music. When you return to your own rhythm, your own pace, your own beat, that feeling, it's like, all right, I'm home now. But again, that rhythm and beat is not provided outside of us. In fact, the world is constantly trying to pull it into its own rhythm and beat. And technology amplifies it, the beeping, the liking, the tweets, this kind of neurotic responding to everything everywhere pulls our attention constantly from our own rhythm and beat. And I really hope, I mean, the entire world's been in a form of lockdown. I think one of my hopes is that millions and even billions of us would have been going, oh yeah, this really suits me a lot more than the way it was before. And from that place, it's like when you bring people to your home, when you feel at home, you're a gracious host and you look after everyone. When you're not at home, you don't know what you're doing. You're kind of lost. So yeah.
I love that. So if we go back to this concept, I see reverberating in the space of attunement, resonance, vibe, harmony. Now you added a musical spin to it. So what tips on a more pragmatic level do you employ? So by way of tips, as far as what do you employ for yourself to get back in tune when you find yourself out of harmony or out of your own pace? What do you do? What does Barry do to tune his instrument, right? Because you're talking about the Renaissance is, and I agree, right, to put your words to it as best as I can, is to see through the body. And it's this attunement of breaking this thinking pattern, breaking this deep cavern of identity, what we're talking about, and getting into the beauty, going outside of the indoctrination, the coercion of mechanical learning constructs, and making people, as you put it, making people do something without a concern for how it makes them feel. I mean, again, you're spot on talking the philosophy of why I'm doing what I'm doing in the alchemy space and the team space, because you present it in a different light. And I like it because it's more refined, more finesse to it, because it's not, I'm as best as I do talk about the qualitative, I feel like I still veer more on the mechanical. And for you, it's really beautifully put, because all of this leads me back to, you got to find your own natural vibe. You got to attune to it. You got to be comfortable in it. Home, as you said, is that. Home is a state of being. It's not a destination. It's not, I will get $5 billion, 5 Ferraris, 10 houses, own Fiji. Tony Robbins is on my, on my speed dial for my coaching. Good to go. I'm a member of the Tiger Club. Yay, me, I don't think that's going to cut it. And I think that's the Renaissance. So how do you attune? What do you do to get back into your vibration?
Well, the first thing to say, the 5 Ferraris, the luxury jet, the island, there's nothing wrong with any of that. As long as you know it doesn't matter, then I'm an aesthetic. I mean, I enjoy everything that feels beautiful. And I equally enjoy sitting having some fish and chips with my family. So there's nothing wrong with the enjoyment. What becomes an issue if I start attaching my sense of self to it, or the belief that it means anything?
I love that.
For me, that is the simple answer, and then it has sort of different possibilities. The main thing is to pause.
There have been many moments when you break into laughter and pausing.
I'm fortunate enough that we live in the countryside, a mile from any other house. So I step outside the door, look at any window, and there's only sky and trees and birds and fields. And nature brings us back instantaneously to ourselves. The ocean, the mountain, the woods, even a pot plant. So anyone who's completely lost, stuck, feeling whatever, is pause, breathe, look at something in nature, and it'll instantly bring you back.
Extreme cases. I look at it. Old Hass, seriously. No, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate here and say, okay, old Haas, many people have tried. Many people have sent Haas heartbeat songs, men, women, coaches, gurus, sages. And never once you sent me that first song. You had me at hello, Jerry Maguire style. And I was like, oh, Barry. And my heart broke wide open. So I would say for old Haas and maybe some of the listeners listening, we may think we're something, right? Like you were talking about, you thought you were contemplative, and then this pause, this global pause really showed you. So how do you crack through even the most hardened veneer that can't absorb the beauty? Because I was desensitized. I could not appreciate the aesthetic.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I'm still figuring that out. I feel like the number one thing that comes is be gentle with yourself.
Good thing I have
and that's taken me a long
Good. Yeah.
That's taken me a long time to learn. I'm one of three brothers. Dad ran the naval police. The masculine was very privileged, and it was all about man up. I mean, I've raced triathlon massive chunks of my life, marathons. There was a big part of my life which was about, let's just see where we can push the boundary, you know. And oh my God, like, I'm so grateful for my body for not giving up on me when I was taking it to places it didn't have a right to go. That gentleness with ourselves is everything. And well, we both love music. I mean, the colors behind you. There isn't, I don't believe, a single perfect algorithm. And I feel like mindfulness and meditation and yoga in its infinite varieties are all wonderful. And I'd say whatever it works for you is what works for you, and don't worry about what anyone else thinks or says about that. There's like, no one can claim the sacred path or the right answer. I love to some extent, I love beautiful things. So I've got so that painting is called The Edge of All Things. I bought it on a spontaneous whim in Leamington a while ago, and it's just felt just like really appropriate. And color and music and sound, for me, it's my food. It's I feel it. It's like it does things to me that I can't put into words. And it makes me calm. It makes me relaxed. It makes me confident. It makes me aware. You know, and who can't walk outside their house? Who can't go and sit and listen to the ocean? I mean, everything we need is everywhere all of the time. But I'd say this is a judgment. I'd say it's harder to find it if you go into the big hyper mall every day, or you're sticking your headphones in and watching endless repeats on Netflix. And, you know, and I've done all of that. But I think those behaviors, their attempt to not give ourselves attention.
It goes back to that very Maslowian self-recognition, self-recognition, the recognizing the cognition of that we have, you know, I guess, let me rephrase that. You know, what I've realized in terms of trauma response, nervous system, embodiment practices, spaciousness, embracing the pause, softening, being gentle, what have you. There's an undertone that the cells equally go, and then that's where growth happens.
Yeah.
That's where this full ripening of potentiality can take place.
Yes.
And so what I like is you've invigorated, you've injected color along with Kate and some others in the group. You've injected color and vitality. Shall I say, let's call it that, vitality. And that seems to me what's coming through as what you found is the keys to how do I unlock vitality in my life, beauty, in my life, beauty in my business, vitality in my business. And it all starts from what I'm seeing from you is you had to innovate yourself in order to innovate
Yes.
business.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
So why do you do this work? Why did you get into this work? I know for me, it's changed over time. Has it changed for you? And if so, what has been the impetus for why Barry shows up every day to do this as his craft?
Oh, wow. I always found it relatively easy to make money, or certainly enough money for whatever it was I wanted to do. I found the exclusive pursuit of money was something that I just couldn't drum up the energy to apply myself to. So it's always been the case that I needed to feel it to do it. It just wasn't an option for me to do something that I didn't feel in order to make money. So lots of these, set up this thing over here on the internet, and then that will create this, and then you'll have this financial freedom. It just doesn't work for me because life is now. The idea that I would suspend my life experience to accumulate something and then enable me to do it just doesn't work. It's like my heart's got a tracking system. It'll just say no. So I've always been pulled into work situations where something, at least from an intentional point of view, was being served or helping. I mean, I worked in the whole fitness. I was a fitness instructor and PT and all that years and years ago. And then I really got into, I was very caught up in, oh, right, I need to help. I need to change other people. And in doing so, I'll accumulate success and money, and that'll then give me freedom. And then the question is always is, right, you get this imaginary time with unlimited money. And now what? So for me now, I'm not trying to change anyone or anything. I'm trying, and I'll say trying because it's not a permanent state, is to live in gratitude of what already is, like the miracle that I actually exist, and to show up in as true and honest a way as I can every day in every situation. And that's not something I actually do all the time because I'm a human being, and the stories of who I should be and the stories of what I should say or not say are still present. They're just like, they're less, what's the word? They just don't have the grip on me that they previously had. And in that gap, all sorts of crazy, amazing, brilliant things happen. One of the things that makes me smile, I talk to a lot of people for the first time because I get lots of random requests for a chat. And one of the things I do very early in the conversation is say, look, you don't need to legitimize why we're talking. The fact you felt for us to speak is in itself reason enough. And I love the potential of something that might be, because we're not trying to make it something. For me, my life, yeah, it's about my daughter. I'm 54. She was born the 3rd of September 2019. She's 16 months old. And she doesn't ask anything of me. She just is who she is. But the feeling of me being true for her, and her coming into a world that I've made as much of a contribution as I could to being the sort of world that she would want to be in and delight in and have the most wonderful experience of. Like, it's for me, it's a non-question. what else would I be doing? What else would I be giving my time to? And I feel enormous privilege, the privilege to have the choice around the things we're speaking about. I've worked, in India, and I've worked in the Middle East, and I've worked in lots of places where there are millions and billions of people who have different material situations, who aren't able to make these choices. They live in the conditions they're in. So the real privilege that we have, is something that I'm very conscious of.
I love that on many levels, both the candidness of doing it for, the legacy of your daughter, and then also this notion of gratitude, right? It goes very eloquently with the concept of energy. And when you're in a state of gratitude, you're in this being state where you don't have any, I like what you said that kind of weaves into this, is that when you sit with what is, potentially could be, what is, what could be, without attaching, without expecting, without forcing an outcome, that's a really potent energetic state to be holding.
Yeah.
Because it's unadulterated energy.
Yes.
It's pure energy that's embodied and held. And if one has done the alchemy or the clearing out, what you're talking about is this inner work, it's inner excavation, getting rid, stripping of the identities and what have you, then yeah, we don't have to really do much. The doing precedes the being, in a sense, right? Because you got to do the clearing out so you can be. And then in that being, in a state of gratitude, something as simple as that, people may go and scoff and go, well, that's gratitude. Oh, if you can actually get that frequency, be in that state, and then show up for people in this day and age where they're isolated, not connected, even on a personal level, forget the implications on a team, on an ecosystem, and they feel held, they feel heard, they feel they don't have to justify, they don't have to legitimize. Give people an opportunity to go, exhale, metaphorically, literally, energetically, on all levels. And that is the ability to then innovate, because then who they really are can shine through in that space. Am I getting it correctly so far, Maestro?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah.
What is the real, and I'm tempted to ask this again to see if I can poke the bear a little bit more, if that's okay. Yeah. I'm on good terms with this Viking, so let's go one step further, since we have such a stable peace accord. So what institutional resistances do we need to overcome? Overcome may be the wrong word. Make peace with, accept, embrace, whatever word resonates. What do you see as institutional issues or systemic issues for us to be real about? What's the, let me put it this way. What ink do you see in the collective well as far as the business landscape that relates to what you're doing and what your mission is?
Well, the things that come up are the relationship between the microcosmic and the macrocosmic. And what I mean by that is this idea that we need to do these big things to solve these big problems is an illusion, in that big things are made up of medium-sized things that are made up of smaller things that are made up of tiny things. So our attention on the microscopic is far more important than our attention on the macroscopic. And what I mean by that is, unless we give attention to ourselves personally, for me, anything we attempt to do externally is hollow. And that, I mean, this is a whole nother subject, is I believe, I certainly had this experience of, is each of us needs to reparent ourselves and the child that lives within us that is wounded just by definition of being a child. And unless we at least give that some attention, everything we're attempting to do in the outer world is an attempt to meet that unmet child need, and therefore comes from fear and anxiety and a craving for love and attention. So number one for me, it's about put attention on your inner child and give them some love and care. And there's all different ways that's possible. And certainly that's something I've continue to do and see as something that I can't imagine a point I won't ever need attention. I think the other thing is, you can't have a fight with someone who doesn't show up. And what I mean by that is the energy of opposition serves no purpose other than to perpetrate the current situation. So I've got some perspectives on movements that I see as having a very well-intended purpose and a futility in what they're attempting to do, because the attempt to confront or dismantle or attack something results in the opposing force increasing the energy. Mm-hmm. So there's this phrase, you get an unstoppable object meets an immovable force. It's physics, where by consciously allowing increasing our own personal energy and frequency, this expansion through resonance becomes possible. It's frictionless, it's effortless, it's graceful, it has finesse. It doesn't require, I talk a lot about this, the three illusions of change. It takes a long time. No, it doesn't. It's instantaneous. The bigger the change, the more resources you need. No, you don't. The macrocosmic and the microcosmic are the same. It's the principle of quantum physics. Mm-hmm. And people don't like change. Well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. It's not, they neither like it nor don't like it. They have attachment, as we do, to the stories we tell ourselves, and in the honoring of their current stories, collective stories, and the possibility of new stories, they love and embrace whatever's going to manifest itself. So for me, it's really about the process is more important than the thing. If we understand the process, and the clues to the process are all in nature, then we stop trying to do unnatural things and we align with what's natural. And that sense of what's natural, it's within us all. How can it not be? We're part of nature. We're a creature. What we have is we're brought into your fish in the water, school and peers and work and university and all these institutions curate an unnatural way of being, which then becomes systemic and institutionalized. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be marching or fighting or raging or blogging about what's wrong or broken. I mean, if you really trace back to anything that's being manifested, there's a hurt, lost, little lonely boy or girl with an unmet need.
And it's a projection of that victim, which is an episode with Tanya that rounds out this notion of empowerment. So I love that, because it's a very astute observation of a kernel, or I guess you could say the crux of what's happening is, and I was victim to it. Instead of holding the vision of what could be and the seed of possibility, we are, trying to perpetuate this resistance and fueling old archetypes. We can quote Buckminster Fuller or Socrates in terms of putting that, creating the new system. I love that you're not even going there. You're hacking it, so to speak, at another level. You're going, let's put all of our attention and focus on the realm of possibilities. Let's hold that space.
Well, what doesn't she know? And by she, I mean Gaia, the planet, nature. I mean, look, babies are born, trees grow, the weather system changes. what doesn't she know? And what is it in nature that isn't perfect? What is it I can possibly do to improve any of it? It all is, and it all's perfect. She knows exactly what she's doing in a way that my mind couldn't even begin to grasp. Science can, take a slither and analyze. I'm fascinated by the mycelium under the ground, the way the trees connect, intelligence shared. So we're finding out more and more about these things. But our cognitive ability to perceive is tiny relative, and therefore trust, allow it is what is there to know. And I mean, this is coming up for me as I'm talking to you now, is what's wrong with privileging not knowing? Like, what is it that we make so important about knowing what? I come back to my nothing beautiful can be measured. Does that mean it doesn't exist because we can't measure it? It's a ridiculous idea that we privilege that which can only be measured, when the things that make us human and that we love, and actually the reasons we live, are outside any form of empirical determination. Our love for our family, our sense of self, joy, laughing, community, spirituality, like, give me a metric, that matters. And I'm not attacking measurement or saying, I wouldn't want to get on a plane that didn't have any instruments, but yeah, just to question what you're privileging, what we're privileging. And that's what I said earlier around, it's just about point of attention. Where is my attention? And to be gentle. If I notice my attention is on something that's not serving, okay, I drifted. That's fine. I'll put my attention here. It's which of us doesn't have the capacity in the moment to choose where our attention is? It's incredible, isn't it?
It's interesting because what you said earlier is fascinating. It almost seems like it would take more effort to not know than it is to know, because you almost have to step into a state of not knowingness. You got to clear out all the things blocking, because really unknowingness or not knowingness is an openness. It's a blue sky mind. It's a mind that isn't made up, is one that is open to anything that can be made by it can be innovated. It's a fertile ground, so to speak. So it seems like almost like it's easier to say I know than it is to say I don't know, right? Both cultural conditioning and as well as what effort it takes to clear out the consciousness.
At what age are we given a gold star? At what age are we given a tick? At what age are we told, well done, this is good? And what age are we told, now go and sit on the naughty step? That conditioning around this is a good behavior, this isn't a good behavior, happens so young. And we associate love with the good behavior and withdrawal of love from the bad behavior. So the conditioning happens pre-cognition. So no wonder we're constantly looking to validate, prove, evidence. We're fixated on it, and it's innocent because that's what we're born into, and then we're conditioned to value and privilege. Like the realization that there's no external measures of any of us that actually matter or are relevant. And certainly my daughter will not be subject to external value judgments about whether she's on track, off track, good, bad, this, that, right, wrong. On what basis is that assessment made? Which is better, giraffe or a goldfish, an oak tree or a sunflower? Like, it's only humans that do this comparative analysis assessment. It's for me, it's a craziness.
It's a perpetuation of insanity without actually going in to find our sanity. As I say, the real sanity is when you're insane, sane on the inside, capital S. So that's interesting because, you know, you speak to this notion of through all of this indoctrination, which takes us full circle really brilliantly to how we started about, you know, your reasons, your intention for starting the business that you started to shift learning, because it's promulgated, or it's premised upon indoctrination based on fear, conformity. And it ties to this law thing, right? It's deterrence, it's punitive, it's not going to work. And then if by doing measurements, we're furthering a punitive behavior or characterization. So it's really brilliant in unraveling that. Again, it goes back to, you're a purist. I see you more as a purist, as a life artist. You know, you want everybody's canvases to be pure and pristine so they can really shine and you know, draw or paint their life's work upon their tapestry, as it were. So I love that about what you do. So any last words before you share your quote for the audience, your inspired quote or takeaway? Anything else that's coming through for you?
Take a breath, relax. You're okay.
Sometimes I feel like are you saying that to me right now? Is that one of those very Obi-Wan Kenobi moments? OB Barry Wan Kenobi? Okay.
You couldn't be more okay. You're somebody whose okayness I don't really give much attention to. You just seem on a perpetual perspective of expression of your okayness, which is just, I'm incredibly blessed to have you as a friend. It's something that gives me so much joy. I mean, anyone, like, just take a breath, know you're okay. And I offer that because I have that as a knowing. Like, I love, I was at the refugee camp on the Syrian Jordanian border, doing some work for Save the Children. I went into the hut before we went into refugee camp, and written on the wall was this statement that said, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And I love that, because of course it's okay, because I'm here. And at whatever point I'm not, or I'm somewhere else. So we're always okay. And I feel like that realization, that knowing of that reminding of each other of that is sometimes just all we need. No matter what we're experiencing, no matter what's happening, essentially and fundamentally, you're always okay. You know, and I get a lot of help with that. I mean, I'm surrounded by and blessed by amazing people, including yourself, that remind me of that. So shall I do my quote?
Yes, sir.
So this is a poem I wrote on the 3rd of December, 2020. Where did I arrive from? If not here, then where? The gift of thought so precious and also causing me to stare. How can this be real? I ask myself, looking deep into the abyss. And truly dense, held together by matter, something seems amiss. Or am I light, spaciousness, consciousness, love, remembering itself into being from below and above? A sound escapes me, released into the dark. I close my eyes, waiting for its return, as my own unique rainbow arc. In every color, every shape, every exquisite form, in this moment, right here, right now, as you are my witness, I am again reborn.
Barry Wilde, the reincarnation of Oscar Wilde. Ladies and gentlemen, cosmic artist. I will say, sacred beauty. The essence of you inviting people, okay, is an understatement. You have brought forth a presence that's made me feel seen, beautiful, and sacred. So sacred beauty, an embodiment of sacred beauty. And who would have thought that has a place in business? Who would have thought that improves people feeling better, feeling more fulfilled, would make them perform better, would make them connect better, would make them show up better, more engaged. Beautiful words. Well, Barry, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing yourself. Thank you for expanding our realm of possibilities and aesthetic. so we can discern and be reborn as well.
I love you, my friend.
I love you, and thank you all for watching another episode of the Vulnerable Power Show. This time, a deep dive into the heart of Barry Holmes. Aesthetic, sacred economy, so many beautiful concepts that we hope invited you into an exploration of what could be. Sit with it, play with it, or do nothing with it. It's all good. And if it's not all good, it's not the end. And that's funny that you used that favorite quote of another soul brother. So thank you all, and have a blessed, aesthetically pleasing, enlivening, and beautiful day ahead.